the most famous paintings of Leonardo da Vinci. In this video, we will see Da Vinci's most famous paintings. Who was the most famous Renaissance artist in the entire history of art? The Last Supper. Artwork by Leonardo da Vinci from the year 1498. In the refectory of the convent of Santa Maria del Grazie in Milan, there is one of the most acclaimed works of art of all time, an icon of universal art. The moment chosen by the artist is the most dramatic of the gospel episode, the moment in which Christ pronounces the phrase, "One of you will betray me." These words are based on what Leonardo would call I moti dell'animo, which means the movements of the soul, that is, the reason why the characters are capable of acquiring life and achieving a high level of emotion and drama in their expressions. The words of Jesus resonate in the room and cause a whole series of reactions on the part of the apostles who, thanks to Leonardo's genius, managed to capture the full impact of the moment on the wall, as a kind of dynamic optical acoustics capable of transcend matter and emit emotion. If we pay attention to the gestures of the characters, the scene intensifies. The apostles look at each other without knowing who Jesus is referring to. His gestures are stupor and astonishment. There is who rises before the incredulity of the words of Christ, who approaches, who is horrified, or who withdraws like Judas, feeling exposed. This sequence of gestures and expressions give action and life to the scene, whose vehemence increases with the expression of a Jesus who appears hurt, full of pity and resignation. The high degree of shock in Leonardo's work comes precisely from the artist's decision not to generalize the representation of the characters in a single style, but to endow each of them with their own physical and psychological traits. His interest is almost more human than religious, to study the diversity of moods, from surprise to anger or doubt, which contrast with the already mentioned tranquility of Christ. In a single scene, Leonardo condenses a variety of attitudes, movements, expressions, and meanings. The representation of the figures in groups of three is not the only element of a plot that links a wide variety of content. Each group of apostles is a micro-story. You can also detect a reference to the circular shape that Leonardo loved so much, according to him propellant of life, and creator of harmony. Christ also presents a triangular scheme that contrasts and stands out from the horizontality of the table. The figures impose for their monumentality. Leonardo da Vinci achieves an incredible depth effect through the perspective arrangement of elements such as the floor, the walls, the coffered ceiling and the tapestries, creating vanishing lines that lead us towards the background. In this way, the work is presented as an illusory continuity to the real space of the refectory. He does it al fresco, a technique commonly used for this type of work, due to the speed and impossibility of retouching. But Leonardo looked for new options that would allow him to work more calmly and with the possibility of retouching. He opted for a technique that consisted of using a combination of oil and tempera, which would allow him to retouch the painting infinitely. But this technique soon showed little adaptation to the surface. In addition, the high humidity of the refectory ended up flaking parts of the paint. The pigment had not been well fixed to the wall and was lost little by little. In 1943, in the context of the Second World War, the Allies bombed Milan and a bomb fell directly on Santa Maria del Grazie. The church was almost completely destroyed, the cloister collapsed, and most of the walls and a large part of the refectory roof were flattened. When the workers removed the rubble, to their surprise, the Last Supper was almost intact. This kind of miracle was possible because, before the imminence of the bombardment, many took care to reinforce and protect this part of the church with scaffolding and sandbags. Be that as it may, thanks to them we can still witness one of the works of timeless beauty with the most mysterious aura and mastery in the history of art. La Belle Ferronnière. Artwork by Leonardo da Vinci from the year 1495. The other great lady, portrayed by Leonardo da Vinci in the Louvre, has a different look. It is not the confident face of the Gioconda, who seems to be smiling with success among groupies and hysterical fans. She doesn't have those diva eyes placed in the sfumato of the Mona Lisa. La Belle Ferronnière looks at us, or perhaps at her rival, as if not understanding how she is not the most beautiful in the kingdom, how she is not the one that Duchamp paints a mustache on or Picasso steals from the museum. But the truth is that it is the Gioconda that gets all the attention, all the prestige. La Gioconda is the star of the Louvre Museum, one of the jewels of Paris, one of the brightest lights in the City of Light, perhaps the most famous painting in the world, while she is a simple portrait of a woman unknown. Even the name that is popularly attributed to her, Ferronier, comes from being considered one more of the lovers of King Francis I of France, even though she was married to an ironmonger who, far from tolerating the behavior of his wife and his monarch, took revenge in the most horrifying way, contracting syphilis and infecting adulterers. That is why while La Gioconda was a mystery, she was a syphilitic. In fact, French syphilis began to wear the Belle Ferronier forehead jewel to hide their injuries. But she waits, year after year, century after century. With that look, with that mouth that also seems to outline a smile. The history of art will put things in their place, and one day she will be the star, because she deserves it. Mona Lisa. Artwork by Leonardo da Vinci from the year 1503. Leonardo da Vinci, one of the most outstanding artists of the Italian Renaissance, knew how to experiment in each of his paintings, always taking the observation of the wise nature as the first resource that every good painter should appeal to. In this painting, the Mona Lisa is supposed to be the wedding portrait of Lisa Gherardini, Illinois Giocondo's wife. Innovative in many aspects, this portrait of Leonardo is shown in three-quarter profile, presenting the sfumato technique, which is blurring, through which he manages to give volume and, therefore, vitality to the figure. The passage from one surface to another, such as from the hair to the cheek, is not delimited by a strong and clear contour line, as was usually done, but instead both surfaces subtly merge. This effect manages to convey a feeling of space, of air surrounding the figure and separating it, in turn, from the background. On the other hand, the development of the so-called aerial or bluish perspective is also. What was his argument? The work, made by an Italian artist, was to return to its homeland. What Vincenzo did not know was that Leonardo himself had bequeathed this work to the then King of France, Francis I. The comings and goings around the unusual event made the Gioconda one of the most reproduced and disseminated images of the 20th century. Is it then that the Mona Lisa smiles? Or is she really bitter? Well, this is basically what Leonardo wanted us to have. In his treatise on painting, he describes that a painter can define the personality of the sitter through the lines of expression, for example, around the eyes and around the mouth. It turns out that in the case of La Gioconda, there are two areas that the great genius has left undefined. Perhaps this Florentine lady who looks directly at us, whatever our angle, is happy to receive our visit. Lady with an Ermine. Artwork by Leonardo da Vinci from the year 1490. Here Leonardo paints a portrait of Cecilia Gallerani, the mistress of Ludovico Sforza, who was the powerful Duke of Milan and also protector and patron of the artist. Cecilia was one of the few women with whom Leonardo established a close friendship. Apparently, da Vinci liked very much the young Cecilia, who was then 16 years old. The girl was intelligent, and as we see, also very beautiful. He understood a lot about literature and music, two disciplines highly valued by the artist, and together they talked about it for a long time. For this reason, she was considered a muse, one and Donna learned, comparable to great women such as Aspasia of Miletus or Exiotia, Plato's student, and because of her poetic skills at court, she was considered great loom of the Italian lingua. The portrayed woman carries a small animal in her arms, similar to a weasel or a ferret, but in popular culture, the most accepted thesis is that it was an ermine, a creature associated with royalty. The composition is a three-quarter profile portrait, something quite innovative for the time. With it, it shows movement and at the same time, the solemn imperturbability of an ancient statue. Typical of da Vinci is the imperceptible smile on Cecilia's lips. The painter preferred to suggest emotions rather than present them explicitly. That was all for today's video. Tell us what you thought, and if you liked it, please give us your subscription and your like. This way you support the art community on YouTube. Until the next video, have a nice day.